at Gloucestershire Archives this afternoon, and I'm talking with Mrs. Green, who has a very interesting story to tell us about the Burchill family. And I understand the Burchill boys went off to fight, 3 of them. Could you tell me a little more about
that? Jack, who became Sir John Burchill, and he was a Conservative MP for North East Leeds, 1918, after the First World War. He actually survived the war, and the eldest son, Jack. There's a statue, what would you say, statue or model of him in the Gloucestershire Regiment Museum, and it tells a bit about him. Percy, the second son, was killed in action near Ypres in 1915, and he was commanding a Canadian contingent and was recommended for the BC. He became a lieutenant colonel. He was born in 1877, so however old that was when he died. And then Vivian, sometimes called Edward, was killed in the Battle of the Somme in 1916, awarded the DSO. When in his 20s, he founded the National Association of Guilds of Help. And before he died, he left a note to a friend, S.P. Grundy. The note said, "If I am scuppered, I'm leaving you £1,000 to do some of the things we talked about." And this note, this scrap of paper, a symbol of the idealism of a lost generation, is preserved in the Imperial War Museum in London.
Yes.
And the legacy founded the National Council of Social Service. There were 2 girls in the family. One was Violet, and the other one was Linda Raja, who they called Linda. And Linda married a Cecil Veery, and in 1907. And David Veery actually produced this book, the Diary of the Victorian Squire, which is what it is. And he married Rosemary Sandilands, who was Rosemary Veery, and she helped Prince Charles organise his Highgrove House Gardens, and of course she lived at Barnsley House. Violet lived in Sacebridge House after brother Jack got married to Adela Wycombe, who came from near Cirencester. And she moved out then when he moved into Bowden Hall, and moved into Port, I presume, Sacebridge House in Gloucester. And my connection with that is that she gave me a cake.
Yes.
When I was a little girl.
Can you tell me a little more about the circumstances of meeting Violet?
I was helping my dad pick leaves up opposite Sacebridge House. There used to be some lovely elm trees along there.
Yes.
And he was an avid gardener and he loved his leaf mould, so we'd go along with the wheelbarrow, pick up the leaves, and I was working there one November with him. I suppose it was cold, and I probably looked a bit cold, I don't know, but this old lady came over the road, old to me, I mean, probably, I don't know, in his 40s, and she said, "I've been watching you help your father." She said, "I'd like to give you a cake." And I think it was a bun of some sort. But rich as she was to me. Rich people didn't give you anything years ago like that. You know, they didn't seem to notice you. You know. And
how old would you be?
I was probably about 10. I think so, anyway.
Mm.
So that was, I say, 40s, but it could have been sort of early 50s, but round about. And I've always remembered that lady. And now she's in the book that I found by chance in Stroud, in the Shambles, second hand. And that's my connection with the Birchells.
Mm. But it goes deeper than that, doesn't it? Some of the things in the book are places.
Well, the places,
things that you've done.
Yes, one a holiday in near Home First, walking the Pennine Way. We used to go off and see the area rather than just keep walking. So we'd have a walk, and then the next day we'd look around. And we found a place called Melton, which is not far from Home First, up on the hills. Went round the church on the outside, I don't think it was open, and the very old gravestones, very old place. Didn't know anybody there, so we didn't bother to see who was buried there at all. But anyway, opposite, on the other side of the valley, or in the valley rather, was this mill with broken windows. And that was Melton Mills. And when I bought the book and read it, there it was, the story of Birchall marrying the lady who came from Melton. Yes. And I couldn't believe what I was reading because I'd been there. Mm. And the connection, you know, it was so interesting really to us when we were there. And
this is Birchall Senior, the one who bought.
Birchall Senior, yes, sorry, yes, he was in business in Leeds, and that was his home area, Leeds area. Yes. And he married the lady from Melton, and I just couldn't believe it when I read all this in there, that I've actually been there. And of course my family, my mother's side, were Upton people, and they probably would have known the Birchells anyway. So that's a connection there. And then you've got the Birchall Institute in Upton, which is in Memorial Hall in memory of Dearman Birchall, the one who came to Gloucester from Leeds. His first wife, he'd married, the one from Melton, and sadly she died after a year and left him with a little girl called Clara. And I presume it got a bit difficult staying in Leeds because that's that area, you know. So he decided when he came through Gloucester one day, he was always catching the train all over the place, and he happened to stop in Gloucester, and somehow or other he found out about Bowden Hall for sale, and he came up, looked at it, and subsequently bought it. So that's when it all started. Eventually he married Emily, which was his second wife, also from up near Leeds, but she came down here to live with him, and she had 4 children by him. So he had the 6. She had 5 children by him, didn't she? Yeah. Yes. That's right, 6 children. So they had a very interesting life and went all over the place, all over the world, really. Yes. And one interesting article, or part of the book, was when they went to Russia for the Tsar's coronation. Yes, they saw they couldn't get a ticket for the coronation. They knew somebody who lived over there, so they were with them, but they couldn't get a ticket for the coronation. But they saw the procession after, which was very lavish, and they had a very interesting life, as I say. On the way to Russia, it took them 4 days, and they just kept travelling for 4 days. But according to their diaries, they were at least a little bit jaded from the 4 days. You know, they were so interested. They met princes that were going to the coronation and things like that. You know, and of course, I suppose that helped the journey. You know, with all this going on. But they actually passed through where the French were, I presume, chased away from Russia after the Napoleonic Wars. This was in 1883. And they thought Poland looked very poor when they were going along the train. But Russia was a little bit more, better quality of life they could see from the train. And they met an old man, actually, that remembers the Napoleonic Wars. You remembered the Battle of Trafalgar, this old man, and Nelson's death. They'd met him.
Yes.
He was about 90 or something.
Yes.
Then. And also, as I say, saw the procession of the coronation of the Tsar, the Tsarina, and they also went to Petersburg, where the Winter Palace was, and they managed to persuade the guards to let them go inside, so they saw inside.
Wow.
And there's lots of interesting stories of when they went abroad, France and all over. The book in itself is to me quite amazing. History of the family, which, you know, they all did very well. They all were very clever. Emily, the second wife, she was a very clever person. And when she was 20, she married Dearman Birchall. And she just sat the Cambridge examination for women.
Gosh.
And she obtained first class honours. Distinguished in divinity, literature and French. And the letters she wrote were the most open letters home to her family from the places she was staying or visiting. And one of the most interesting parts of the book really is in Moscow, and she wrote the letters from there that just shows you what you could see in them, you know.
Yes.
Because she was very clever and she could put it all together, explain everything. But they also knew well-known Victorians, a long list: Norman Shaw, Ruskin. They met Oscar Wilde, the Duke of Rutland, Matthew Arnold, Thomas Gambier Parry, who is obviously Gloucestershire person, and Sir Michael Hicks Beach, well-known Gloucester family. Someone in the family married a Hicks Beach. Professor Huxley, Sir John Collier, Beatrice Webb, and prominent men in Gloucestershire like Lord Edinburgh, Sir John Dorrington, Lord Ducie, Thomas Bazley. There's a Bazley Road in Matson in Gloucester, it's presumed named after him. Sir John Akers, Barwick, Lloyd Baker, who was the Hardwick Court, Thomas Dyer Edwards, who owned Greenwich Abbey, and then sold it to the monks, Benedictine monks, not sure, and then Bishop Ellicott, and the cathedral hierarchy of deans and canons. All these people were in their lives, which is amazing.
Incredibly well connected.
And they met a relative of Rossetti, sister. But it was very sad for the 5 children of Dearman and Emily that their clever mother didn't survive. But they all grew up to be remarkable people.
The impact of the family, those that survived the war, was Jack was the only one of the boys to survive.
The eldest, he survived. Well, he was the eldest son, because Clara was the eldest.
Yes.
That was the first wife, daughter.
But both, if I remember correctly, both Dearman Birchall and Jack both went on to both spend time as leading characters.
Oh yes.
In all sorts of ways. Can you tell me a little about that?
Well, Jack, as I said in the beginning, he was the Conservative MP for North East Leeds.
Yes.
From 1918 to the Second World War. So that was a good stint. He was obviously a well-liked man for people to keep voting for.
Well, indeed.
And did a good MP, I presume.
Yes.
And he was ecclesiastical commissioner 1923 to 1929, and a member of the Church Assembly. His father, indeed, became High Sheriff in Gloucestershire.
Yes.
And he was very... also, all the family were interested in the Three Choirs Festival, which is another interest of mine, to see who composed the music that were around in those early days when Dearman was around, like Elgar and Vaughan Williams and that. And he obviously met them, but Elgar sadly isn't mentioned in the book, because I've read an article or a book about Elgar and his friendship with another Worcester man, and because he was from Worcester. But in neither book is Birchall mentioned at all, and I'd have thought it would have been in the diaries, because Elgar was so famous, wasn't it? Yes. That possibly they just never came across him, but I'm surprised that it's not mentioned. And as I say, the people we know, that one or two that the descendants, or no, not descendants, ancestors, are mentioned in the book, worked in the Bowden Hall, employed by Bowden Hall by Birchall, which is nice because we know their descendants now. And as I say, my mum's family came from Upton originally. I no doubt Mr. Moss, the historian, he probably might be interested in this, unless he's already seen it, because it's a lovely history of the time. Yeah. The fact that he knew all these people that I mentioned, and also he bought another connection in a way with us, was that he bought Cranham Woods, and my husband came from Birmingham as an evacuee, as a baby, ended up living under Cranham Woods with his mum, the Fiddler's Elbow, but then we know Fiddler's Elbow, up near Prinnage Abbey, and so the connection there is interesting, that we know the places that Dearman Birchall bought, the Cranham Woods that he bought, and Buckhold House. His children used to go up there and play to keeping house, the dear little cottage there, but of course now it's all very much altered and added on to, which looks to me a little bit sad, because when you pass it you think that's not the place we knew, but that's progress, isn't it? But we still think about the connections when we go up there. Yes. The fact that the children were up there that I'm reading about in the book, and that was their playground, if you like, and they horse riding, etc. Yes. And the Prinnage Abbey connection, that they were friendly with the family, and the lady who lived there with her father, mother. She was no Dyer Edwards, and she became Lady Roths, and was on the Titanic, but fortunately she survived. So that's quite another interesting connection, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you think it helps you to understand a written history better because you share some of the places?
Oh, no doubt, yes.
Yes. What does that bring to you as a reader? And as a researcher, as somebody with an interest?
It's the connection, isn't it? It's as I say, when I first read about Violet, and I thought, I met that lady.
Yes.
And I'd love to have, chatted to her about these days.
Yes.
And how it was, because she lost her mother, obviously, they all did, in a young age. 32, I think she was when she died. And she'd just given birth to her last son, who sadly died along with Percy, the second eldest son in the First World War.
Yes.
And also he was the one, as I say, lost his mother. We didn't even know his mum. But the way they grew up and became very benevolent people to people who didn't have as much as them, I thought was very, very interesting, really. And as I say, to Vivian, sometimes called Edward, left the money for what eventually became the National Council for Social Service. And that strikes me as quite amazing. I'd love to have known him as well, but I only met Violet. So. But it's as though I have met them in a way, by reading all about what they did.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a simple item in there about going to see the Severn War.
Yes.
And that's very Gloucestershire. So
It is.
my father brought me up with going to see the Severn Ball. That was one of his favourite pursuits.
Yes.
And of course, Liam and Gertrude used to do a lot of hunting with the gentry, and my father was a great follower of the hounds, but not on a horse. And I did do it to a certain extent. We used to go and see them, because we loved to see the hounds, really, and the horses, galloping, and that was quite a spectacle. And having said that, you don't really like to think about what the end result has been, but on the other hand, it was a spectacle, really, and I think that's what most people, and he certainly did it, going all over Gloucestershire, riding up over Robbinswood Hill to come back home and things. And of course I grew up on Robbinswood Hill, so it was there again, another connection. Yeah.